The Galactic Empire loomed over the galaxy like a shadow, its vast fleets and unyielding ambition casting a pall over every star system that dared resist its dominion. For centuries, it had expanded relentlessly, swallowing planets, crushing rebellions, and imposing its iron will on countless civilizations. Its leaders, cloaked in the cold arrogance of those who believed themselves invincible, ruled from the heart of their sprawling capital, a fortress world bristling with weapons and propaganda. The Empire's message was clear: submit or be annihilated. And now, their gaze had turned to the United Systems Alliance, a fragile coalition of free planets that stood as one of the last bastions of resistance. The ultimatum arrived on a day that would forever be etched in the annals of history. It was delivered not through the usual channels of diplomacy but via a holographic transmission that crackled with menace. The Empire's envoy, a towering figure clad in obsidian armor, spoke with a voice that dripped with disdain. "The Galactic Empire demands your unconditional surrender," he declared, his image flickering in the dim light of the USA Council chamber. "Resist and your worlds will burn. Your people will be enslaved. Your name will be erased from the stars. You have 72 hours to comply." The chamber erupted into chaos. Council members shouted over one another, their voices a cacophony of fear and anger. Some argued for immediate surrender, their faces pale with terror. Others called for war, their fists pounding on the table as they vowed to fight to the last breath. Amid the tumult, one figure remained eerily calm. Ambassador Ilara Voss, the representative from Earth, sat with her hands folded neatly on the table, her sharp green eyes scanning the room with quiet intensity. She was a woman of average height, her dark hair streaked with silver, her face lined with the marks of a life lived under the weight of responsibility. But it was her presence that commanded attention, a stillness that seemed to cut through the noise like a blade. Ilara had seen this before. She had been born on a war-torn Earth, a planet that had once teetered on the brink of annihilation. She had watched as her people rebuilt from the ashes, forging a future out of the rubble of their past. That experience had shaped her, hardened her, and taught her the value of resilience. Now, as she listened to the Council's panicked debates, she felt a familiar resolve settle over her. The Empire's ultimatum was not just a threat, it was a test, and she had no intention of failing it. When the room finally quieted, Ilara rose to her feet. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm but carried an edge that silenced the room. "Surrender is not an option," she said, her gaze sweeping over the Council. "If we bow to the Empire, we betray everything we stand for. But neither can we afford to rush into a war we are not prepared to win. We must be strategic. We must be smart." Her words were met with a mix of admiration and skepticism. "And what do you propose, Ambassador?" asked Councillor Yarrick, a grizzled veteran with a cybernetic arm and a perpetual scowl. "Do you have a plan? Or are you just here to lecture us?" Ilara allowed herself a small, knowing smile. "I propose we meet with the Empire's envoy, not to beg for mercy, but to show them that we are not afraid, that we see through their bluster and their threats, and that we are ready to fight if it comes to that." The room fell silent once more. The idea was audacious, even reckless, but there was something in Ilara's tone, something in the way she held herself, that made it impossible to dismiss her outright. "You would go alone?" asked Councillor Clara, a serene alien with shimmering blue skin. "Without protection?" "I would," Ilara replied. "Sometimes the greatest strength lies in appearing unafraid. And if I fail, well," she shrugged, her smile widening, "at least I'll have given them something to think about." The Council debated her proposal late into the night, but in the end, they agreed. Ilara would meet the Empire's envoy on neutral ground, a desolate asteroid station orbiting a dying star. As she prepared for the journey, she found herself reflecting on the path that had brought her here. She had not chosen this life. It had chosen her. From the ashes of Earth to the halls of interstellar diplomacy, she had fought for every inch of ground she now stood on, and she would not let the Empire take it from her. The asteroid station was a bleak, lifeless place, its corridors echoing with the hum of ancient machinery. Alara stood in the center of the meeting chamber, her hands clasped behind her back, her expression unreadable. The Empire's envoy arrived with a retinue of guards, their armor gleaming under the harsh light. The envoy himself was a towering figure, his face obscured by a helmet that reflected the cold glow of the station's lights. He regarded Alara with obvious disdain, his voice dripping with condescension. "You are the one they sent?" he sneered. "A lone human? How quaint." Alara met his gaze without flinching. "I am Ambassador Alara Voss of the United Systems Alliance," she said, her voice steady. "And I am here to discuss the terms of your withdrawal from our territory." The envoy laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Withdrawal? You misunderstand, human. We are not here to negotiate. We are here to dictate. Your surrender is inevitable. Your resistance is futile." Alara tilted her head, her smile never wavering. "Is that so? Then why are you here, talking to me? If we are so insignificant, why waste your time?" The envoy's laughter died, replaced by a cold silence. He took a step closer, his towering frame looming over her. "Do not mistake my presence for weakness, human. I am here to give you one final chance to save your people. Surrender or face annihilation." Alara held her ground, her voice calm but firm. "And if we refuse?" The envoy's hand twitched toward the weapon at his side. "Then you will learn the price of defiance." For a moment, the two stood locked in a silent battle of wills. Then Alara spoke again, her tone soft but laced with steel. "You underestimate us. You see us as weak, divided, afraid. But you are wrong. We have faced extinction before and we have survived. We have rebuilt, we have grown, and we have learned. And we are not afraid of you." The envoy's hand tightened on his weapon, but he did not draw it. Instead, he leaned in, his voice a low L. "You will regret this, human. When our fleets descend upon your worlds, when your people cry out for mercy, remember this moment. Remember that you brought this upon yourselves." Alara's smile never wavered. "And when your empire crumbles under the weight of its own arrogance, remember this moment. Remember that you were warned." As she made her way back to her ship, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. The road ahead would be long and fraught with danger. The Empire would not take this lightly, and their retaliation would be swift and brutal. But for the first time in a long time, Alara felt a flicker of hope. They had faced the Empire head-on, and they had not flinched. And that, she knew, was just the beginning. The stars stretched out before her as her ship left the asteroid station behind. A vast, uncharted expanse of possibilities. Somewhere out there, the Empire was plotting their next move. But Alara was ready. Whatever came next, she would face it with the same quiet determination that had carried her this far. And she would not stop until the galaxy was free. The asteroid station faded into the void behind Alara's ship, a speck of cold metal swallowed by the infinite blackness of space. She sat in the cockpit, her hands resting lightly on the controls, her mind replaying the encounter with the Empire's envoy. His threats had been expected, his arrogance predictable. But there had been something else in his demeanor, a flicker of uncertainty that she had seized upon. The Empire was not invincible. It was a machine, vast and powerful, but machines had weaknesses, and Alara intended to exploit them. Her ship, the Starlight Siren, was a sleek vessel designed for speed and stealth rather than combat. Its interior was sparse, a reflection of Alara's pragmatic nature. The only personal touch was a small holographic image of Earth, its blue and green hues a stark contrast to the sterile gray of the ship's walls. She glanced at it now, the image flickering faintly as the ship's systems hummed around her. Earth had taught her many things: resilience, adaptability, the importance of hope. But it had also taught her the cost of war. She would not let the galaxy pay that price again. The journey back to the United Systems Alliance's headquarters was uneventful, giving Alara time to prepare for the storm she knew was coming. The Council would be waiting, their fear and doubt simmering beneath a thin veneer of resolve. She would need to be ready, not just to defend her actions but to inspire them to stand firm. The Empire's retaliation would be swift, but it would also be predictable. They relied on fear, on the belief that their enemies would crumble under the weight of their might. Alara's task was to shatter that belief. When she arrived at the headquarters, a sprawling space station orbiting a distant star, she was met with a mixture of relief and apprehension. The council had gathered in the central chamber, their faces a mosaic of worry and determination. Alara stepped into the room, her presence immediately commanding attention. She moved with purpose, her every gesture deliberate, her voice calm but firm as she addressed the assembled leaders. The Empire's envoy delivered his ultimatum, she began, her gaze sweeping over the room. But he also revealed something far more valuable, his fear. He tried to intimidate me, to make me believe that resistance was futile. But I saw through it. The Empire is not invincible. They are overextended, their resources stretched thin. They rely on fear to maintain control, but fear is a fragile thing. If we stand together, if we show them that we are not afraid, we can break their hold. Her words were met with silence, the weight of her message settling over the room like a heavy cloak. Then Counselor Yerrick spoke, his voice gruff but tinged with respect. "And what do you propose we do, Ambassador? Stand firm and hope they back down? Or are you suggesting we strike first?" Alara shook her head. "Neither. We must be strategic. We must expose their weaknesses, rally our allies, and prepare for the inevitable conflict. But we must also be ready to fight on our terms, not theirs. The Empire expects us to cower or to lash out blindly. We must do neither. We must be smarter, stronger, and more determined than they are." The council debated her proposal late into the night, their voices rising and falling like the tides of an ocean. Some argued for immediate action, others for caution. But in the end, they agreed to follow Alara's lead. She had faced the Empire and emerged unscathed, and that alone was enough to inspire a fragile hope. As the meeting adjourned, Alara retreated to her quarters, her mind racing with plans and possibilities. She knew the Empire would not wait long to retaliate, and she needed to be ready. Her first task was to gather intelligence, to find the cracks in the Empire's armor that she could exploit. She reached out to her network of contacts, a diverse group of informants, rebels, and former Empire soldiers who had grown disillusioned with its tyranny. Each conversation was a delicate dance, a balance of trust and caution, but slowly, a picture began to emerge. The Empire's greatest weakness was its reliance on fear. Its leaders believed that their subjects would remain loyal as long as they were afraid. But that fear was a double-edged sword. It bred resentment, rebellion, and dissent. And now, with the Empire's resources stretched thin, those cracks were beginning to show. Alara's contacts spoke of unrest in the outer territories, of rebel factions growing bolder, of supply lines stretched to their breaking point. The Empire was a colossus, but it was a colossus with feet of clay. Alara's next step was to rally the USA's allies. She reached out to the leaders of the free planets, her messages a blend of diplomacy and determination. She spoke of unity, of the need to stand together against the Empire's tyranny. Some were hesitant, their fear of the Empire outweighing their desire for freedom. But others were inspired by her words, by the quiet strength that radiated from her like a beacon. Slowly, the coalition began to grow, its members united by a common purpose. The plan was simple in concept but complex in execution. The Empire's fleet was vast, but it was also centralized, its ships dependent on a network of supply depots and communication hubs. If those hubs could be disrupted, the fleet would be thrown into chaos. Alara's goal was to infiltrate one of these hubs, a heavily fortified station deep in Empire territory, and disable its systems. It was a dangerous mission, one that would require precision, stealth, and a willingness to risk everything. But if it succeeded, it could turn the tide of the war. But as they reached the control room, they were met with a sudden ambush, a squad of elite Empire soldiers blocking their path. The team fought with everything they had, their movements a blur of speed and skill. Alara's heart pounded as she engaged the enemy, her every move a testament to her training and determination. The battle was fierce, the air filled with the sounds of blaster fire and the clash of steel. But in the end, the team emerged victorious, their enemies defeated. With the path clear, Elara and her team entered the control room, their movements swift and purposeful. Zara worked quickly to disable the station systems, her fingers flying over the controls as she bypassed security protocols and shut down communication arrays. Kale provided cover, his knowledge of Empire tactics proving invaluable. And Rin kept watch, her sharp eyes scanning for any sign of reinforcements. As the final systems were disabled, Elara felt a surge of triumph. They had done it. They had struck a blow against the Empire, one that would send shockwaves through its ranks. But even as she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction, she knew that the fight was far from over. The Empire would not take this lightly, and their retaliation would be swift and brutal. But for now, they had won a victory, one that would inspire hope and strengthen the resolve of the USA and its allies. As the team made their way back to the ship, Elara found herself reflecting on the road ahead. The battle against the Empire would be long and difficult, but it was a battle worth fighting. And as long as there were those willing to stand up to tyranny, there was hope. The stars stretched out before her, a vast, uncharted expanse of possibilities, and she was ready to face whatever came next. The starlight siren slipped through the void like a ghost, its engines humming softly as it carried Elara and her team away from the Empire's crippled station. Behind them, the once imposing hub was now a lifeless husk, its systems disabled and its defenses shattered. The mission had been a success, but the air inside the ship was thick with tension. They had struck a blow against the Empire, but they all knew the cost of such a victory. The Empire would not take this lightly. Retaliation was inevitable. Elara sat in the cockpit, her hands resting lightly on the controls, her gaze fixed on the stars ahead. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, each one vying for her attention. The mission had been a gamble, a daring move that could have ended in disaster. But it had worked. They had proven that the Empire was not invincible, that its armor could be cracked. And yet, the victory felt hollow. The Empire was vast, its resources seemingly limitless. One disabled station would not bring it to its knees. It was a start, but only that. Behind her, the rest of the team moved about the ship, their movements tense and deliberate. Kale, the former Empire soldier, was cleaning his weapon, his face a mask of concentration. Zara, the engineer, was hunched over a console, her fingers flying over the keys as she analyzed the data they had stolen from the station. Rin, the pilot, was pacing the length of the ship, her sharp eyes scanning the readouts for any sign of pursuit. They were a skilled team, each member chosen for their expertise and their unwavering resolve. But even they could not hide the unease that hung over them like a shadow. Elara rose from her seat and made her way to the central cabin, her presence immediately drawing the team's attention. "We did well," she said, her voice calm but firm. "But this is only the beginning. The Empire will retaliate, and we need to be ready." Kale looked up from his weapon, his expression grim. "They'll come after us hard. They can't afford to let this slide. It's a blow to their reputation, and they'll do whatever it takes to make an example of us." Zara nodded, her eyes still fixed on the console. "They'll also tighten security. This won't be easy to pull off again. We'll need a new approach, something they won't see coming." Rin stopped pacing and crossed her arms, her gaze sharp. "We need to hit them where it hurts. Not just their stations, but their morale. We need to show the galaxy that the Empire can be beaten." Elara listened to each of them, her mind racing as she pieced together their thoughts. They were right. The Empire's greatest strength was its image of invincibility. If they could shatter that image, they could inspire others to rise up. But it would not be easy. The Empire was ruthless, and it would stop at nothing to crush any sign of rebellion. "We'll need to be smart," Elara said finally. "We can't afford to make mistakes. Every move we make has to count. We need to gather more intelligence, find their weak points, and strike where they least expect it." The team nodded, their expressions a mixture of determination and apprehension. They knew the risks, but they also knew what was at stake. The fight against the Empire was not just about survival. It was about freedom, about the right to live without fear. and they were willing to risk everything for that cause. As the ship continued its journey back to USA headquarters, Elara retreated to her quarters, her mind still racing. She needed a plan, a strategy that would allow them to keep the pressure on the Empire without overextending themselves. But more than that, she needed to inspire hope. The USA and its allies were watching, their faith in the cause hanging by a thread. One misstep and that faith could crumble. When they arrived at the headquarters, the atmosphere was electric. News of their success had spread, and the station was abuzz with excitement and relief. But Elara could see the fear beneath the surface, the uncertainty that came with knowing the Empire's retaliation was imminent. She made her way to the council chamber, her team following close behind. The council was already assembled, their faces a mixture of hope and anxiety. Elara stepped forward, her presence immediately commanding attention. "We struck a blow against the Empire," she began, her voice steady and strong. "But this is only the beginning. The Empire will retaliate, and we need to be ready. We need to stand together to show them that we are not afraid. If we do that, we can win this fight." The council listened in silence, their expressions a mixture of admiration and doubt. Councillor Yarrick was the first to speak, his voice gruff but tinged with respect. "You've done well, Ambassador. But the Empire is not easily defeated. What's your next move?" Elara met his gaze, her eyes sharp and determined. "We need to rally our allies to strengthen our position. But we also need to keep the pressure on the Empire. We need to hit them where it hurts, to show the galaxy that they can be beaten." Elara received the news with a sinking heart. She had expected the Empire to retaliate, but the speed and ferocity of their attack were staggering. The outpost's fall was a devastating blow, one that could weaken the USA's position and embolden the Empire. But even as the weight of the loss settled over her, Elara felt a familiar resolve harden within her. They could not afford to falter. They had to fight back. She gathered her team and made her way to the council chamber, her mind racing with plans and possibilities. The council was already assembled, their faces grim and anxious. Elara stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "The Empire has struck a blow, but we are not defeated. We must respond, and we must do so decisively. We cannot let them think we are weak." As the preparations for the counterattack began, Elara found herself reflecting on the path that had brought her here. She had not chosen this life, but she had embraced it, driven by a belief in the power of hope and the importance of standing up to tyranny. The road ahead would be fraught with danger, but she was ready. Whatever came next, she would face it with the same quiet determination that had carried her this far. The counterattack began under the cover of darkness, the USA's forces moving with precision and purpose. Elara and her team were at the forefront, their every move calculated, their every action deliberate. The battle was fierce, the air filled with the sounds of blaster fire and the clash of steel. But slowly, surely, they began to turn the tide. As the outpost came back under USA control, Elara felt a surge of triumph. They had done it. They had struck back at the Empire, reclaiming what had been lost and proving that they would not be defeated. But even as she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction, she knew that the fight was far from over. The Empire would not take this lightly, and their retaliation would be swift and brutal. But for now, they had won a victory, one that would inspire hope and strengthen the resolve of the USA and its allies. As the team made their way back to the ship, Elara found herself reflecting on the road ahead. The battle against the Empire would be long and difficult, but it was a battle worth fighting. And as long as there were those willing to stand up to tyranny, there was hope. The stars stretched out before her, a vast, uncharted expanse of possibilities, and she was ready to face whatever came next.